Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. President Donald Trump has yet another mark on him that he can never, ever, ever undo. The House of Representatives decided to use one of the most extraordinary constitutional remedies at their disposal, impeachment, making President Donald J. Trump just the third president in all of American history to wear that shameful mark. The reason President Trump was impeached for Article 1, abuse of power, is because he tried very hard to extort a foreign nation into interfering in American elections. He tried to get them to instigate a criminal investigation in a country with notoriously corrupt prosecutors to go after an American citizen, violating not just the sanctity of American elections for all of us, the sanctity of protecting them from foreign interference, but also the president's basic fundamental duty to stand up for the Americans he represents. The second article Trump was impeached for is obstruction of Congress. And that's because his posture towards the impeachment inquiry and congressional oversight in general has shown by far the most blanket defiance of any president in history. As the Democrats laid out in the articles themselves, President Trump, quote, without lawful cause or excuse, directed executive branch agencies, offices, and officials not to comply with those subpoenas. In the history of the Republic, no president has ever ordered the complete defiance of an impeachment inquiry or sought to obstruct and impede so comprehensively the ability of the House of Representatives to investigate high crimes and misdemeanors. There are still numerous people that Democrats in the Senate would like to hear from, actually, who've been blocked by the president, people the president doesn't want you to hear from. And we'll talk about whether we'll get to hear from them in just a bit. But normally, the articles of impeachment would go to the Senate now in preparation for the president's actual trial. But Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, in an interesting bit of strategic gamesmanship, is not sending them over. In fact, she said last night she's waiting to see what the trial in the Senate looks like before handing over the reins. Now, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has come out and said he doesn't care one way or the other. In fact, he said, frankly, he'd like not to have a trial at all. But it is clear not having the catharsis of an exoneration in the Senate is not going to sit well with the president. Here's what Senator Lindsey Graham said on Trump TV earlier tonight.
I just left President Trump. He's mad as hell that they would do this to him and now deny him his day in court. The reason they're denying his day in court is they know their case sucks.
No, president's mad. So the president's clearly not in a good place. He is well aware of what being impeached means for his legacy. Of course, you want to get a sense of how Trump, a person who's incapable of speaking truthfully about his own inner states, feels about this. This is what he hypothesized President Obama would feel were he to be impeached back in 2014.
Do you think Obama seriously wants to be impeached and go through what Bill Clinton did? He would be a mess. He would be thinking about nothing but it would be a horror show for him. It would be an absolute embarrassment. It would go down on his record permanently. But they're saying, oh, he'd love to be impeached. That would be so good.
It would go down on his record permanently. He would be embarrassed. It would be a horror show for him, Donald Trump said. One big argument Republicans have made in defense of the president, they made it for hours and hours yesterday, and this is to the extent they've made an argument, few, of course, in good faith, is that this impeachment was all essentially predetermined, that the crime was pretextual. The Democrats were always going to vote to impeach President Trump. And I have to say, as someone who has covered this story from the first day of this Congress, night in and night out, I've talked to dozens upon dozens of members of Congress. I've talked to their staff. I can tell you, the House leadership did not want to impeach the president. They did not want to get to this point. The Democrats have faced the question of what to do about the president's unconstitutional actions and tendencies since the day he took office, and certainly since the day they won a House majority. And they did everything in their power all year to avoid it, even though there have been voices pushing for impeachment from nearly the moment the president took office because of his behavior. House leadership, led by Nancy Pelosi, resisted those calls from the grassroots and for many of their voters and many in their caucus until they could resist no more, until the facts came to light about the president misusing his office to extort a foreign nation into interfering in the next election. We learned that from the notes of President Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president. When the Ukrainian president said he wanted to buy more American weapons to defend against Russian aggression, President Trump infamously responded, quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though." That was what changed things. The facts changed things. The president's actions changed things. That's what brought us to this point, despite the fact the president accepts no responsibility for it. Now, the Republicans are right in a way that it was always kind of predetermined. It was fated Trump would be impeached. But that is because of Trump's nature and his character. All of this reminds me of a poem that Trump liked to quote on the campaign trail. It's actually from a 60s song that then became a kind of viral meme that he then read. And on the campaign trail was part of this really disgusting, bigoted, anti-immigrant tirade that he would do about a woman who takes in a snake as long as the snake promises not to bite her. And then the woman takes in the snake and the snake bites her. And the snake says to her, "You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in." Confession of sorts, I think. Americans knew what Donald Trump was when a minority of us voted to take him in. He warned us. So now we are here.
It is Friday, the 20th of December of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, we have made it to Friday, and the French 77s are even more important to imbibe in because we are celebrating of sorts. Because one Donald John Trump is impeached today, impeached tomorrow, and impeached forever. Now, I have read a witness who had testified, I believe, in front of Judiciary, and essentially as a witness maybe against Trump in some way. Well, he has written a opinion piece, essay, letter to the editor. Nonetheless, he's come out and said that unless the impeachment articles are, now I believe he used the term communicated to the Senate, then Trump is not impeached. Lawyers for Trump in the White House, I guess that means Sekulow, Rudy, others, are claiming that Trump is not impeached. Even though we had all of these hearings, and even though we had the vote, it was all on television too, remember? Gavel to gavel. But according to them, he is not impeached because it has not been communicated to the Senate. Of course, the Senate has been communicating about what they are going to do. And essentially what they're going to do is that they're going to railroad this one through, and it will be a sham trial, and it will not be a fair trial because it will not be fair to the United States and the people of America. It's not just a fair trial for the defendant, but it's also a fair trial for us, the people. And the Senate has already communicated that they will not allow a fair trial. They will not be impartial jurors. So I don't know what's being communicated here, but it seems like a tremendous amount of communication about impeachment has occurred. So, excuse me, I think your argument is moot, but then again, I just have the middle name of Justice. Okay? What do I know? Well, all sorts of other... Oh! Now, Christian Today. We got to get through this one. Christian Today came out and called for Trump's impeachment. And I must say, that it was, in some ways, truthfully so, a conservative magazine. I mean, gosh, Billy Graham started it, right? So, they're not really known for positive expository essays on liberation theology. Let's just put it that way, all right? Not in the positive, let's make that clear. If they're going to be writing about liberation theology and Christianity today, it's not going to be positive. Nonetheless, their editorial board came out and said that Trump must be impeached. And Trump went off today calling the conservative Christianity Today a liberal magazine. Anybody who criticizes or disagrees with Donald Trump is the other. Billy Graham's, that's Franklin Graham's dad. And Franklin Graham is, well, let's put it this way. Franklin Graham has to do what Trump wants because Trump has compromat on Franklin Graham. We already know that. We already know about a pool boy or two. So the conservative Christianity Today is being pilloried as a liberal magazine, almost communist. And they don't really believe in God. They're not real Christians. Now, this may actually fly with Trump's base because it's been defined or referred to Christianity Today as not only a conservative magazine, but an evangelical magazine. And a lot of people who don't know anything about evangelical Pentecostals would consider that to be, wow, that, when Christianity Today comes out, that's going to really turn a lot of people. That's going to take the cult. That's going to take the Colt 45 right out of the cult. Well, no, it's not. Because I think that if you I know, ask a fire or a tongue of fire gargling rattlesnake dancing Pentecostal that Christianity Today just came out and said that Trump should be impeached, and that Pentecostal snake dancer is going to say, who? They don't know who Christianity Today is. It's not conservative enough for them. Please. Because there's a stark division. Also, when we speak of evangelicals, we need to make the demarcation, the delineation between white evangelicals and black evangelicals. They are decidedly different in outlook, temperament, and I would say reason. Completely different. Almost like it's black and white. Indeed. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Trump knows damn well what impeachment means for his legacy. He does. And he only projected it back in the day when they were trying to get Obama impeached. It's so rich when these GOP leaders come out and say, oh, the Democrats wanted to impeach Trump from day one. Members of the Democratic Party indeed wanted Trump impeached because from day one he was breaking the law and pretty much laughing about it. I mean, think about how many court cases. They say, we got to take him to court. We've been taking him to court, and he keeps losing, and he keeps doing what he's doing. And then the argument is, well, if you impeach him, he's going to keep doing it. Damn right he is. Jesus, people. Anyway, he was projecting on Obama about how Obama would feel if Obama got impeached. Jeez. And everything that we are experiencing now is what he said Obama would do. Projection be thy middle name, John? Then on the rest of the menu, the House passed a union-backed trade deal one day after impeaching Trump. Yeah, that's a do-nothing Congress, huh? Huh? A GOP candidate for governor in North Carolina cited one lady as the source for all of his lies on immigrants. Yeah, this is the guy who said that there's tens of thousands of immigrants beating up white kids all over North Carolina. And one lady told him that, so it has to be true. And in a report by the Washington State House that has been forwarded to the FBI, GOP State Representative Matt Shea has been accused of domestic terrorism against the United States of America. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where a Canadian court affirmed the citizenship of the sons of Russian spies who inspired the TV series The Americans. I was just in an argument in a Facebook community page here in Southern Oregon that all of this thing about Vlad stealing hacking into the DNC server and stealing, according to this person, they were leaked. The Russians had nothing to do with it. It's all just a lie. How did they take us over with just $4,000 worth of online memes? They have sleeper cells of just the exact same people as what the TV show The Americans depicted. We busted one cell. And police have arrested 334 people in one of the largest anti-mob operations ever seen in Italy. And they've had a lot of anti-mob operations there. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Link, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. That recurring contribution to us may be the cost of what you might spend on an espresso type coffee drink. If you could send funds from that once a month, that really helps us pay our bills. And as the year comes to a close by the middle of January, I really have to swap out some machinery here. I've got two machines that have been workhorses for the last 4 years of this 8-year stint of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio. And it's actually more than 8 years now, a considerable amount more. And we'll be at 9 years in the blink of an eye. And we only have been able to do this because of your generosity. Though how we really keep this little powerhouse resisting, most of it comes out of our own pockets, but still, we would not be able to do any of this without you because you are our biggest contributor, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and that is sincere. There's no joking about that. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. All you have to do is go to @Netroots Radio. How simple is that? I'll tell you how simple it is because Tom takes care of it. And Tom's a pro. And thank you, Tom. We count on you so much, really. And you could follow me at Justice Putnam. It's a pretty good spot to follow me at because I post the show notes and links diary of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy about 10 minutes before showtime. And put that out on social media for your social media linkage pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts. Most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Wow, so much Latin. Have you ever heard so much Latin in America before? Yeah. God, people. Oh, my God. You know, we're Le Grand Le Boeuf. You know, the big beef, the big ox. Not necessarily known for having a big brain, but we got some big muscle. In fact, we got so much muscle, we got muscles in our ear. Takes up where our brain might be. Oh, boy. Yeah, you just have to laugh at it. And then by, I don't know, educating to a certain degree, maybe you might rise up above Le Grand LeBoeuf or De Grand LeBoeuf. Maybe, maybe not. No, they'll just say, yeah, he's a big ox with a little bit of more brain than usual. I'm sure that's how it is. Just as a funny aside, whenever I would go to Paris, for instance, I was really concerned about not being the ugly, loud American. Because I got to tell you, Americans are really loud in Paris, and it's a bit embarrassing, I have to say. There's a great picture of Mitterrand and Clinton meeting. And Clinton is just all spread out. You know, his arms are like over the back of the divan that he's sitting on, and his legs are kind of spread out and straightened out. And Mitterrand is a big man. I mean, he was, 6'5", 6'6"? Much taller than Clinton. And Clinton's a pretty big guy, too. But Mitterrand is just sitting all small and kind of thin, you know, because that's what Europeans do, you know. They don't spread out. And I thought that was the perfect emblematic symbol of what it means to be an American. So I go to Paris, and there's just this raucous stuff like around the corner, and I'm like, man, Americans. So I always tried to not be the ugly, loud American, you know, try to be small and all that. But it didn't matter wherever I'd go. They recognized me as an American. And pretty much the reason that was given to me is because this is another thing that we do, is that we meet people's eyes because we're, at heart, just big puppy dogs who want to sit on people's laps. And in certain parts of Europe, meeting someone's eyes is actually a grave invasion of space. You have invaded that locus of proximity, as psychologists would name it. And it makes people uncomfortable, or to put it another way, they get kind of pissed when you've invaded their space. So we tend to unconsciously meet people's eyes and say hi, you know, or, you know, nod like an acknowledgement. And that's not normally done, apparently, in proper society. So no matter what I did, not even meeting people's eyes, I still somehow was always recognized as, you know, the American. Though I will say, one time I was rounding a corner around the Champs-Élysées, and there was another one of these raucous things. I'm like, oh, God, Americans. I turned the corner, and it was a bunch of Germans. In Germany, they don't act like that. But when they're in Paris, oh, man, it's like a bunch of British hooligans. All right, let's get on with what we have here in the curated part of the show. And this first offering comes out of The American Independent by Dan Desai Martin. Yesterday afternoon, the House of Representatives, and that was Thursday, by the way, for those of you listening by podcast, the House of Representatives approved a trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico by a 385-41 vote. Wow. The House approved the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, a trade deal that will replace the Clinton-era NAFTA agreement. The vote came less than 24 hours after the House approved 2 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. Now, you do know that the original USMCA came out of the Trump White House, out of his wheelhouse. Okay? Let's remember this now. Democrats and organized labor agreed to support the USMCA only after months of negotiations and changes to the original proposal. In early December, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that the final version is infinitely better than what was initially proposed by the administration. Well, I guess so. And then on December 10th, the AFL-CIO announced its support for the trade deal. Make no mistake. We demanded a trade deal that benefits workers and fought every single day to negotiate that deal, Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, said at the time. And now we have secured an agreement that working people can proudly support. Well, if it's union-backed, will it ever make it out of Mitch McConnell's graveyard? Already, I think that Trump is torn. He's torn to trumpet this, no pun intended, as the greatest trade deal in the history of all trade deals in the universe, or hold it at arm's length or further because it stinks. Union-backed. The new trade deal makes critical improvements to a 25-year-old trade agreement to address 21st century issues, support workers, and improve our environment. Representative Derek Kilmer, Democrat of Washington State, chair of the moderate New Democrat Coalition, said in a statement after the vote. Why isn't it not the New Democratic Coalition? Just wondering. While Democrats largely back the measure, some Republicans have voiced skepticism, of course. When Obama named Romney Care the ACA, and the Republicans came out and said, no, that's Obamacare. It doesn't matter. Whatever they give you, if you do what they want, it's the worst thing that ever happened in the world. How could anybody come to this terrible strategy? Yeah. From my perspective, is not as good as I'd hoped, Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell said earlier this month. And Senator Pat Toomey, a repug from Pennsylvania, went even further, calling the New Deal terrible, counterproductive, and a step backwards because it helps workers. And we're talking about contracts here. The owner of a company should have the right to not pay their workers anything. A contract is, after all, a contract. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is also from the American Independent, but this time by Josh Israel. North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest, obviously a repug, doubled down on false claims he made last month that tens of thousands of kids in his state had been attacked by migrants. Rather than cite a source for his implausible claim, he attributed the number to an estimate by one lady. As previously reported, Forrest, who is seeking the repug nomination to challenge Democratic Governor Roy Cooper next year, complained at a November 25th immigration roundtable that several communities in North Carolina were not partnering with the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency to enforce immigration laws. He also attacked Cooper for vetoing a bill that would require sheriffs to do so. At the roundtable, he made the stunning claim that there are tens of thousands of children in our state that have been victims of these violent criminals already. These undocumented migrants, these scum. Yeah. And so now all those poor white kids will grow up with that on their mind. Really now. PolitiFact rated this claim as false, stating that there is no available data to support his claim. PolitiFact noted that a Forest spokesperson attempted to support this by documenting that there were 1,020 criminal charges for immigrants sought by ICE and released in 2019, but only 2 of those identified children as the victims. Well, you know, when a migrant hulks up, they can really wreak a lot of havoc, more than you'll ever know. In fact, it's so much more than you'll ever know, they can't even document it properly. It's so hulked up. On Thursday, that was yesterday, Forrest complained in a radio interview that he is being fact-checked on these numbers. The media's criticizing me. Oh, maybe I should do it in the local dialect. The media's criticizing me for the numbers I'm using. But the reality is that the average person in North Carolina gets this. That's regardless of who's committing the crime. We want to get them off the street. He added, that one lady presented that there were probably over 10,000 children who had committed crimes against them. The patronizing dialect is solely within the purview of this reporter and nobody else. Don't blame the rest of Netroots Radio, please. The media, in that interview, first posted by the liberal research group American Bridge 21st Century, Forrest also claimed that North Carolina Fires, a Southern Poverty Law Center designated nativist extremist group, has been keeping records of this stuff the whole time. Well, of course they have. And you know where they get them? InfoWars. The fact-check site Snopes debunked a similar false claim recently that 10,800 children were raped in the country by undocumented immigrants last year. North Carolina crime statistics show only about 2,000 rapes of all kinds reported each year. And understand, that's like we're talking North Carolina here. Okay? So we're not necessarily talking about rapes among strangers. Or even lovers. In reality, studies show undocumented immigrants as a group commit fewer crimes than the rest of the U.S. population because who wants to make themselves visible and get kicked out of the country? Or worse, put in an icebox baby gulag? Forrest's anti-immigrant views are nothing new. In June, he said that diversity and multiculturalism that America faces today is only going to destroy the country. Apparently, when you're a color commentator, you only see white. Final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes our way by Seattle Times staff writers David Gutman and Jim Brunner. State Representative Matt Shea planned and participated in domestic terrorism against the United States before and during the armed takeover at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, an investigation commissioned by the Washington State House found. The 108-page report found that beginning in November of 2015, Shea, working with militia leader Eamon Bundy, helped in the planning and preparation of the Malheur takeover, a 6-week conflict at which dozens of armed protesters, I take exception to the use of the term protesters, occupied the refuge in rural eastern Oregon. The standoff ended after one protester was shot and killed and dozens were arrested. It wasn't a protester. But they're staff writers, and I guess they have certain journalistic protocols that they have to follow. Well, I don't. Well, we do, but still. Representative Shea, as a leader of the Patriot movement, planned, engaged, and promoted a total of 3 armed conflicts of political violence against the United States government in 3 states outside of the state of Washington over a 3-year period, according to the report released yesterday, Thursday. In one conflict, Representative Shea led covert strategic pre-planning in advance of the conflict. Immediately after the report was released, Representative J.T. Wilcox, the Republican minority leader of the House, said Shea has been suspended from any role in the House Republican caucus. He should resign, Wilcox wrote. He cannot use House Republican staff. He cannot meet with the caucus. His office will be moved. and as indeed Shea's name and picture were removed from the House GOP website. Shea said he would not step down, calling the investigation a sham, and of course that's what they always say. I will not back down. I will not give in. I will not resign. Stand strong, fellow patriots. Sieg Heil! The report concluded that Shea, a Spokane Valley Republican, first elected in 2008, is closely associated with several armed militias and uses his prominence in the Patriot movement to dispatch militia members to conflicts with government officials. The Patriot movement is a loose organization of conservative groups and individuals in mostly rural areas that includes organized militia members and the so-called sovereign citizens who are generally united by deep suspicion and fear of the federal government. The movement grew out after standoffs at Ruby Ridge in Idaho and Waco, Texas in the 90s. The Oklahoma City bombing was carried out by Patriot movement members. Shea, age 45, also traveled to an armed standoff in 2014 in Bunkerville, Nevada, and publicly supported the armed militia standoff involving rancher Cliven Bundy, and engaged in a 2015 armed conflict in Bonner County, Idaho. The report has been forwarded to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. You can read more at the links at the show notes and links diary. Please do. All right, we better get to our break. And when we get back from that break, you do know we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. About 12,000 species of tiger moth exist on Earth. Some of them swoop and dive out of harm's way when a hungry bat tries to make them a meal. But other tiger moth species are more blasé. They just don't bother to flee from the hungry bats.
And I really just wanted to know why the difference. What factors might be influencing whether a species is more or less likely to perform these evasive maneuvers?
Wake Forest University behavioral ecologist Nick Dowdy. He says it's a matter of taste. Some of the moths are delicious, but others are toxic and taste terrible. When the airborne predators catch these unappetizing moths, they'll spit them out, giving the insects a new lease on life. In a field experiment, Dowdy and his colleague William Connor filmed how 5 different species of tiger moths responded to bat attacks.
And what we found was that those species which were really toxic, so when the bats captured them, they almost never ate them, those species were much more likely to be what we call nonchalant, species that do not perform evasive maneuvers very often. On the other hand, species that were really palatable were much more likely to perform those evasive maneuvers, almost in a sense sort of hedging their bets. Because if they don't make that escape, if they are captured by a bat, those species are more likely to be eaten.
Another factor is that evasive maneuvers have their own set of risks, which may be why unpalatable moths tend to avoid them. For example, diving away from bats burns fuel, gives the insects less time to seek out mates, and could expose them to other perils, such as getting stuck in water.
Or there could be predators on the ground like mice and other mammals.
The study is in the journal Frontiers in Ecology and Evolution. Dowdy is now trying to identify the chemical compounds responsible for making some tiger moths taste bad. Once those findings are in, chemical analysis of museum specimens could help reveal how rare, endangered, or even extinct insects have behaved around predators.
We can still study animal behavior even without a living organism. That's, I think, pretty amazing.
Other animals with conspicuous warning signals, such as garishly colored poison dart frogs and foul-smelling skunks, are also known to be slow movers. Perhaps if you're deadly, toxic, or just plain stink, it can pay to be lazy. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1790. That was the day that work for many living in the new country of the United States began to change in a very significant way. Samuel Slater operated the first cotton spindle machine to spin yarn in the U.S. in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. The 48-spindle machine ran on the water power of Pawtucket Falls. It helped to transform the textile industry. It also earned Slater the nickname the father of American manufacturing. Slater had been born in Derbyshire, England in 1768 to a large farming family. When he was 10 years old, he went to work at the local cotton mill. As a young man, he moved to Rhode Island, bringing his knowledge of cotton spinning with him. Some back home in England called him Slater the Trader for bringing the technology to the Americans. But Slater was undeterred. He expanded his technology in what came to be known as the Rhode Island system. He built his factories based upon the patterns of family life in New England villages. First, he hired children ages 7 to 12 years old to work in his mills. Then he expanded to hire whole families. Entire villages worked in his factories and shopped in his company stores. Others quickly copied Slater's ideas. By 1815, there were 140 cotton manufacturers in and around Providence, Rhode Island. More than 25,000 workers kept the factory spinning. This textile factory system relied on the cotton grown by the slave labor in the U.S. South. Slater had helped to launch the American textile industry. This was the first large-scale industrialization in the United States. This industrial revolution changed how thousands and thousands of people earned a living. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
Labor activists are disappointed that more was not accomplished at the UN Climate Change Conference held in Madrid December 2nd to 15th, 2019. The conference, called COP25, was called to review the Paris Agreement on climate change and other initiatives. To find out what happened at the conference, I talked to Samantha Smith. Ms. Smith is the director of the labor movement's Just Transition Center. I asked her about her expectations going into the conference.
We went to the COP in Madrid expecting that governments were going to respond in a meaningful way to the climate crisis. Because we really are in a crisis, right? We have one heat and extreme weather event record after another being broken. There is an urgent need to transform economies and societies to get a just transition for workers. So we were expecting the governments were going to rise to that challenge, and specifically that they were going to make commitments about how they were going to get a just transition on a national level and bring down emissions, do meaningful stuff about adaptation, and for rich countries to provide finance to developing countries. We also were hoping that there was going to be progress on things like a loss and damage mechanism, which is a mechanism that would help poor countries manage the impacts of climate change or compensate them for impacts to which they can't adapt.
Were your expectations met?
Well, I mean, I have a particular perspective on this because most of the work we do at the Just Transition Center is actually closer to the ground with federations and with unions, with workers, getting concrete plans for just transition. So if I'm thinking about whether or not there's progress on that front, there absolutely is, right? Like the government of Germany has agreed a very good plan, negotiated with German labor, to transform the German power sector, including increasing the share of renewable energy and energy efficiency, and also phasing out coal. And that plan involves no worker being left behind. So pathway for every worker, either to an equivalently good job or to pension. And also in Spain, it looks like we're finally going to get delivery of the similar agreement that the Spanish government negotiated with the unions about phasing out coal mining. And there were other countries, cities, and states that were also reporting progress on just transition plans at the climate negotiations. So if you look at that level, then stuff is happening and it's pretty good. If you're looking at the UN negotiation level, it was a disaster. I mean, amongst other things, UN security ejected, locked out, debadged more than 200 people, including some of the leaders of our own trade union movement. There were some really bad discussions about emissions trading and how governments might be able to use that in order to avoid cutting emissions at home. There's really not a lot of progress on finance, and governments are very shy about talking about what they would do to make more progress in cutting CO2 emissions. The negotiations got to a conclusion, and that was in a way a victory because there were a few countries that were really making life hard for others in the negotiations. But it was a disaster.
So what happens now?
What happens now is that, we have a year before the next round of climate negotiations. And in this year, I think we can expect to see citizens, including labor, pressing their governments to cough up the kind of action that we need on just transition in order to do something meaningful about climate change.
And that's it, international labor news you can use. You can find our features and daily newscasts on our website at www.radiolabor.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
For accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit. We're expecting a high of around 57 to 58. And I must say, it got a bit balmy yesterday. It got up into the mid-50s, a tad higher, and we should be a tad warmer than that. We did have a bit of rain yesterday and have in the days previous. Might have somewhat of a, I wouldn't call it a drying out period, but a period where we won't have so much rain falling from the sky, though considerable cloudiness. Winds will be out of the southeast at 10 to 15 miles per hour. The area is in a wind advisory, though more towards Ashland and that part of Medford, Ashland area is expected to have considerable gusts of winds that could knock over semis, so be careful. I think that in my little protected area where the mothership resides in Rogue River, we'll have some, stiff winds, but not the devastating kinds that they will down there in the flatlands. Oh, my. Partly cloudy for most of the day, increasing clouds tonight, followed by showers developing, sometime around 8 p.m. or so. Lows around 45, winds will be out of the southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then they will shift tomorrow out of the southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And we should get about a half inch or more of rain tomorrow. And tonight, we're supposed to get almost a tenth of an inch of rain just overnight. And then looks like a half inch or more tomorrow. We will be having considerable rain on Sunday as well. Looks like something closer to an inch. And then Monday as well, another big spate of rain, about a quarter of an inch. And then maybe I might have some dry period to travel on Tuesday. Though Thursday and Friday, I may come back on Thursday. Oh, I forgot to mention, or remind folks, we will be on a holiday schedule on Tuesday. Mix of regular program and holiday schedule programming, of course, special holiday programming. And I will be going up north to visit with my grandkids and spend the holidays with them, this being the first Christmas in almost a year now that my son has passed their father. So I will be away from the mothership. We will turn it into somewhat of a robot station, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed I don't have a power outage. Because as I've mentioned before, we need to replace machinery, but because I have battery expansion in the MacBook, it's not working as a laptop anymore. So if it shuts down, it won't reboot unless I can get somebody over here with a little bit of Mac know-how to be able to raise the radio station. So do stay tuned. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that won't happen. Otherwise, it works as it normally works. You won't miss K-Grow in the morning. That's right on. That's on Auto Connect. Oh, yeah. But we will be having special holiday programming mixed in with our regular programming till late Thursday or late Friday, depending. So do stay tuned. And what else here in the weather locally? Well, today, pollen is none. The air quality index locally is good at 27 parts per million. The daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is holding at 30.03 inches. Visibility, actually right here, is about 1 mile because it is very foggy at the moment. And relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 48 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 52 and partly cloudy. Rome is 58 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 36 and fair. Kabul is 35 with smoke again. Hong Kong is 63 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 49 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 71 and partly cloudy. Did you hear, though, that they had an average temperature of 106 over the whole continent of Australia? And they say that it's partly cloudy, but there's a lot of smoke just right out of Sydney coming their way, though the prevailing winds are moving away from them. They still got a lot. Back to the weather report. San Francisco is 48, mostly cloudy, and New York is 26 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. This first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is by Steve Scherer out of Reuters. The son of Russian spies who was born in Canada and was stripped of his citizenship after his parents were arrested for espionage in the United States was affirmed as a Canadian citizen by the country's top court. Canada's Supreme Court unanimously upheld an earlier federal court ruling that said a 2014 administrative decision to strip Alexander Vavilov of his citizenship was unreasonable. The hit TV series The Americans was inspired in part by the story of Vavilov's family. His parents came to Canada in the 1980s under deep cover and assumed names, with the mission to immerse themselves in Western society as a sleeper cell that would activate on orders from Moscow. The family later moved to Boston, where Vavilov's parents were arrested in 2010 and charged with spying. Vavilov's parents returned to Russia in a spy swap. Both Alexander and his older brother Timothy also were sent there. They did not speak a word of Russian, said their lawyer who represented Vavilov. They didn't even know they had a Russian grandmother or that their parents were Russian. Vavilov was born in Toronto in 1994, as was his brother Timothy 4 years earlier. The ruling will apply to both. Vavilov will be in Toronto today and is expected to speak to reporters in the afternoon. My understanding, their lawyer said, is that both brothers want to settle in Canada. It will take time logistically, and they will be looking for work. Audrey Brezareff and Elena Vavilova used the aliases Donald Hethfield and Tracy Ann Foley, names lifted from two Canadian children who had died in infancy. They later admitted their real names to U.S. authorities. The Vavilov brothers thought it was a case of mistaken identity when their parents were arrested, their lawyer said. When their parents admitted to the charges, they were in a taxi and heard it on the radio.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
This final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is brought to us by anonymous worker bees at Reuters. Police have arrested 334 people in one of the largest anti-mob operations ever seen in Italy, highlighting the growing reach of the Granata Mafia. I am not going to be able to pronounce that name properly. I apologize, because this is not an Italian word that I am familiar with. Regardless, the 'Ndrangheta is based in the southern region of Calabria, the toe of Italy's boot, and has surpassed Sicily's more famous Cosa Nostra to become the most powerful mafia group in the country and one of the largest crime gangs in the world. Police said they seized hundreds of suspects in the early morning swoops around the country, with some arrests also carried out in Germany, Switzerland, and Bulgaria. Amongst the possible charges facing those detained were mafia conspiracy, murder, extortion, loan sharking, corporate fraud, and money laundering. Wow, it sounds like what's happening in the Oval Office right now. Politicians were involved, as well as lawyers, accountants, public officials, court clerks, all people who had jobs and did not need to put themselves at the service of this mafia group, Niccolo Gratteri, the prosecutor who led the investigation, said. The mobsters are not in a position to carry out sophisticated money laundering. To do that, they need professionals. Italian investigators say the group, which is made up of dozens of smaller clans that all answer nominally to senior leaders in Calabria, is now Europe's top cocaine broker. Amongst those arrested was a former lawmaker from Berlusconi's center-right Forza Italia party, the center-left mayor of the Calabrian coastal town, and a senior official in the Carabinieri police. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.